They say some moments sneak up on you like a summer breeze, soft, quiet, and suddenly everything changes. It was supposed to be just another night. A regular comforting routine of two people sitting together a little too close on the couch, letting the flickering TV fill the silences between us. I never expected what came next, what he said, the look in his eyes, and how that moment unraveled something hidden between us for years. Before I start, tell me, from which cities are you watching tonight? I love seeing where everyone is joining us from. Let me know in the comments and settle in, because what I'm about to share is personal, honest, and something that still lingers with me every time I sit down on that same couch. Let's begin. My name's Christina. I'm 56 now, but I don't feel it most days, or at least I try not to. You move through life doing what you're supposed to. Raising kids, working hard, folding laundry while your body aches, and thinking one day you'll sit back and finally understand it all. The truth is that day never really comes, but moments do, moments that stick to you. Douglas, my son, is 31, and no, this isn't about anything strange or inappropriate, so don't go there. It's about something far more complicated than that. Emotion, vulnerability, the way love can surprise you, even in the form of comfort and honesty when you least expect it. That night, I had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters. The house was quiet. I'd made us a big bowl of popcorn, one of those nights where I was just craving that salty, buttery smell. You know what I mean? I carried it over to the living room where he was already scrolling through Netflix. Pick something easy, I said, sitting down with a soft sigh. Nothing where I have to think too hard, he smirked. That little sideways smile that always made me want to reach out and push the hair from his forehead, even now that he was all grown. You mean like a rom-com? He teased. Not unless I want to cry over people who look like they've never had a bad hair day in their lives. We landed on a light drama, something with enough heart to keep us both interested, but not so deep that it would leave us emotionally run out. Or so I thought. The room was dim, just the light from the TV dancing across our faces. I could hear the wind pushing gently against the windows. He was leaning back, one arm on the top of the couch, and I rested the bowl in the space between us, a familiar rhythm, the kind only time and years of quiet understanding can create. Halfway through the movie, I felt it, that tiny shift. He turned his head toward me slowly. At first, I thought he was going to comment on a line, maybe ask if I remembered the actor from something else, but instead he just looked at me for a second too long. What? I asked, smiling a little. Do I have popcorn on my face? No, he said, voice low. I was just thinking. I raised my eyebrows. Dangerous habit. He didn't laugh. He looked at me in this way that immediately made my chest feel tight, like I needed to brace for something. His voice softened even more, barely above the hum of the TV. You ever feel like we missed something? He asked. I blinked. Missed something? Yeah, like in all these years, you and me. We've been there for each other through everything. But sometimes I wonder if there's more I should have said, more I should have asked. I paused the movie. I could feel the stillness settle over the room like a thick blanket. My fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the popcorn bowl. I don't know, I said carefully. You've always been good to me, Douglas. You don't owe me anything. He shifted, sitting forward, elbows on his knees. Now that's just it. Mom, I think I've always seen you as strong, like unshakable. But lately, I've been wondering who's been there for you. That question, so simple, so direct. But it hit me somewhere deep. I looked down at my lap. My hands that had held him as a baby, pulled him out of trouble, clapped for him at school plays, patched, scraped knees, and stirred soup late at night. Those same hands that for years I'd learned to hold back. Hold in, stay still. I guess I got used to doing it all on my own, I said after a long moment. Douglas leaned closer, gently, took the bowl from my hands, and set it on the table. His voice had this warmth, the kind you can't fake. You don't have to be alone all the time, you know. Not with me. I turned to him and our eyes met. And in that one shared look, I saw a man who wasn't just my son, but a man who truly saw me. Not just as his mother, as a person, a woman, someone who had carried too much and said too little. The moment didn't last forever, but it didn't need to. Thank you, I whispered. I think I needed to hear that more than, he gave my hand a gentle squeeze. No expectations, no pressure, just the warmth of connection, that rare kind where you feel known, held, and honored. We didn't finish the movie that night. We just sat there talking about little things, big things, life. And I realized sometimes love doesn't shout. It doesn't always look like roses or grand gestures. Sometimes it's sitting beside someone who's seen all your seasons and choosing to be present completely for just one quiet night on the couch. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset. Quite the opposite. It was like something inside me had been stirred gently, like a spoon through warm tea. The quiet conversation with Douglas lingered in my chest, and every time I shut my eyes, I could still feel the weight of his words resting on my shoulders like a soft shawl, comforting, but heavy with meaning. When I got up the next morning, the house was filled with that early kind of hush, the kind that happens just before the day fully wakes up. Birds whispering outside the window, the coffee machine groaning in the kitchen, sunlight stretching through the blinds like golden fingers. Douglas was already up, sitting at the table with a mug in his hand. He looked out the window, lost in thought. And for a moment, I just stood in the hallway and watched him. Funny how you can raise someone, live through every phase of their life, and still catch yourself seeing them for the first time. His hair was still messy from sleep, and there was a tiredness in his posture, but also something peaceful. "You're up early," I said as I padded into the kitchen barefoot. He smiled without turning. "Didn't sleep much." "Same." I poured myself a cup and joined him at the table. For a while, we didn't talk, and that was okay. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was restful, like we were both holding the same fragile thought and didn't want to break it with words. Then he looked at me again, not as intense as the night before, but still thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" He said, "Of course. When did you stop talking about your dreams?" That one hit me in the chest. I stirred my coffee slowly, pretending to think, but the truth was, I already knew the answer. "When your father left," I said softly. "Guess I thought no one really wanted to hear them anymore." Douglas frowned. "I do. I always have." I gave him a small smile. "Sweetheart, you were 12. You needed stability. I needed to give you that. Dreams didn't have a place in the schedule." He leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning me like he was seeing the hidden chapters of my life. "Maybe that's what I missed," he murmured. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Maybe I was too focused on what you gave me and not enough on what you let go of." My eyes stunned unexpectedly. It wasn't often someone acknowledged that not just the sacrifices, but the quiet ones, the ones you make every single day without expecting anyone to notice. "I used to want to open a little antique bookstore," I admit with a half laugh. One of these cozy ones with mismatched rugs and shelves that smelled like old pages. Douglas grinned. "Why didn't you?" "Life?" I shrugged. "Bills, groceries, broken faucets." That last word made him flinch slightly, but I reached across the table and took his hand. "And I don't regret that," I added quickly. "You were always the best thing that ever happened to me." "But you asked why I stopped talking about dreams." "That's why." He nodded slowly, as if memorizing every word. "Maybe it's not too late," he said. After a while, I raised an eyebrow. "To open a bookstore, to dream again." I chuckled softly, then looked at him. Really looked. He was no longer the boy who needed me to be everything. He was a man, one who wanted to give something back. And not just out of duty, but from a place of deep affection and respect. I could feel it in the way he spoke to me now. In the way he didn't look past me but into me. It's strange when roles begin to shift, when the child starts to carry some of the weight. You don't realize it's happening at first. A bag of groceries here. A phone call to remind you to rest. The way they look at you like you matter as you, not just as mom. Late that afternoon, we went for a walk just around the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but everything felt different. The way the breeze brushed my face, the way he walked beside me, not ahead or behind. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd just set down a suitcase I'd forgotten I was carrying. "I've been thinking," he said as we turned the corner. "Oh," he grinned. "I might take some time off work." I stopped in my tracks. "Why?" He looked over at me. Serious because I want to help you. Not because you need it, but because I want to. I've been chasing career goals, pushing nonstop. But when I'm here with you, I feel something I don't feel out there. I looked at him, heart swelling in a way I couldn't describe. Douglas, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not. I'm doing it with you. Maybe we could start something together. A side thing. Books, antiques, tea, I don't know, something small. The idea felt like a flicker, a candle lit deep in my chest. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine something new. Not just survival, but living, creating, sharing something again, side by side with the person who knew me better than anyone. We walked in silence after that. But the silence had changed. It was filled with ideas, unspoken dreams, and the tender beginning of something we hadn't dared to name. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I was no longer just his mother. I was becoming someone more, a friend, a partner in a new kind of journey. And whatever came next, I was ready to meet it. Fully awake, fully open, and finally no longer alone in it. The days that followed felt different. Not in a dramatic way, but in the gentle, almost imperceptible shifts that matter the most. We fell into a rhythm again, but it wasn't the old kind. It was something softer, fuller. Douglas was still staying with me. A few days had turned into a week, then two. I think we both knew we were holding on to a window of time that felt rare and honest. He started helping around the house more. Not in the way that made me feel incapable, but in the way that made me feel seen, folding laundry without being asked. Fixing the squeaky back door that had annoyed me for months. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found him organizing my spice rack. "Do we can cook?" I asked, laughing. He looked over his shoulder, playful. "Not well, but I figured if I stare at enough cumin and paprika, I'll magically learn. You'd better learn how to pronounce turmeric first." He gave me a look, then kept sorting. It was in those small, mundane moments that I started to realize something else. I liked having him around, not just because he was my son, but because we were good together. Our energy matched. Our conversations felt effortless and we laughed a lot, more than I had in years actually. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, we sat out on the porch with mugs of Sherman Ollie, the kind of golden light that photographers chase spilled across the railing. He was reading back in the chair, barefoot, hair tasseled from a late nap. And I was wrapped in the soft throw blanket he always teased me about. "Remember when I used to sit out here and make you talk to me about girls?" I asked. He chuckled. "Yeah, you'd ask me a million questions I didn't know how to answer." And now he glanced at me. Now I ask myself questions I never thought I'd have to like. He hesitated, like whether I ever really knew what love was. I turned to him slowly, heart pulling tight. "I thought you were in love with that woman last year," I said gently. "Thought so too. But now I think maybe I just wanted to be needed." Sipped my tea, letting his words settle between us like mist. "And what do you want now?" I asked. He looked at me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not intense, not dramatic, just open, still honest. "I want to be present," he said. "I want to build something real, something that lasts. Not with someone who fits some idea I had when I was 20, but with someone who makes even a silent moment feel full." I nodded slowly. "That's a good answer." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. A simple gesture, but it caught me off guard. My breath hitched slightly and he noticed, but he didn't say anything. He just let his hand fall back to his lap, eyes thoughtful. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes it feels like we're stepping into new ground. And I don't want to trip." "You won't," he said. "We won't." There was something unspoken beneath those words, but neither of us dared to name it. Not yet. It wasn't about romance or confusion. It was something else. Something rooted in emotional truth, in vulnerability, in the kind of connection that defies simple explanation. Later that night, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Douglas standing there holding the book in his hand. "You said you used to love this author," he said. "Figured we could read a chapter together." I looked at the book, an old hardback I hadn't touched in years. I had mentioned it a fan a few days ago, probably while rummaging through the hallway closet, and he remembered. "That's sweet," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He sat at the edge of the bed while I pulled the covers around me. The way the lamp cast a warm light over the pages, the way his voice carried through the room as he read. It felt like time had folded in on itself, like we'd found a portal into something timeless, safe, precious. And yet beneath that safety was an undertow, an emotion I couldn't name. It was an attraction, not in any simple sense. It was recognition, a feeling of being understood at my most raw, of being cherished, not for what I could do, but simply for existing. When he finished the chapter, he closed the book and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked again. That had become his new habit, checking in quietly, gently. And it wasn't annoying. It was grounding. "I'm better than okay," I whispered. I don't know how to explain what's happening between us." "You don't have to," he said. "We'll figure it out." And then he did something that caught me completely off guard. He leaned forward and kissed my forehead. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loaded, but it was intentional, meaningful. He left the room after that without another word. And I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Some part of me knew we were crossing emotional lines, but not in a way that felt wrong. More like we were rewriting a language we'd both forgotten how to speak. One built on care, honesty, and an intimacy that had nothing to do with flesh and everything to do with presence. It was beautiful and it was terrifying because when you've lived a whole life behind armor, letting someone in, really in, is the bravest thing you'll ever do. The next morning, I stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the sky shift from soft gray to amber. The early light spilled across the counters. And for a while, I let it warm my face as I leaned against the sink, just breathing. Something had changed. Not just in the room, in me. There's a moment, a rare one, when you realize that you're no longer carrying things alone, that you're no longer bracing for life, but allowing yourself to lean into it. That's what it felt like. Douglas was still asleep. I could hear the low rhythm of his breath through the wall, and for once, I didn't feel like a mother rushing to get breakfast on the table or a woman trying to keep up with life's demands. I just felt here in this moment whole. He came out a little later, hair still messy, shirt wrinkled from sleep. He smiled at me like we'd been sharing thoughts in our dreams. "Morning," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Morning." We didn't need much else. He poured himself coffee and joined me at the table. And for a while, we sat in that soft domestic silence that only comes from deep comfort. But we both knew a conversation was waiting. "I've been thinking," he said finally, looking down at his mug. "I might stay in town longer than I planned." I glanced at him. Yeah, I want to be close to you, not just for a visit. I want to build something that makes sense for both of us." I studied him, feeling my chest swell with something too big to define. It was love, yes, but not just a mother's love, not just a son's care. It was deeper. A partnership of two souls who had walked through fire separately and somehow found calm in each other. "I want that too," I said softly. We didn't need to call it anything. There were no labels, no declarations, just presence, just this quiet current flowing between us, strong and steady. Later that afternoon, we cleaned out the old sunroom together. It had become a storage space over the years, boxes stacked high, old lamps, unused photo frames, a dusty exercise bike that had never seen real use. "What's the plan for this space?" he asked, lifting an old blanket from a cracked wooden chair. I looked around, imagining soft rugs, low shelves filled with books, maybe a couple of armchairs and a kettle always warm on a side table. "I think it wants to be something new," I said. "Maybe a reading nook, maybe a space to write. Maybe, I don't know, a little corner where we dream again." He smiled at me from across the room. "Let's make it ours." Those words stayed with me for days. We painted the walls together the following weekend, a soft honey color. We filled the windowsills with tiny plants. I brought out my old journal. He started sketching out ideas for a little online shop, old books, handmade bookmarks, tea blends we could create together. It was small, quiet, but it felt like life. One night, as we sat in the new space, our knees barely touching, I turned to him. "Do you think people would understand us?" I asked. He looked at me calm and sure. I don't think we need them to. I nodded slowly because he was right. What we had wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to be lived with care, with truth, without shame. There's a kind of intimacy that goes beyond what people usually talk about. It's not built on sparks or grand gestures. It's built on showing up, on listening deeply, on seeing each other through the hardest years and still choosing to be gentle. That's what Douglas and I had found. Not a scandal, not a story for gossip, but a rare, beautiful companionship between two people who had spent their lives giving to others and had finally found space to give to each other. I didn't know what the future would look like exactly, whether we'd ever take that leap and name what was blooming between us. But I knew one thing. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of loneliness, not of judgment, and certainly not of love, not this kind, not the kind that arrives quietly, stays gently, and teaches you how to breathe again. So when I think back to that night, the one where we sat down to watch a movie and he turned to me and said those unexpected words, I smile because that was the night my life began again. And I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. Not now.